Do you ever watch YouTube videos with photographers that take you behind the scenes and then you see the final images and you're like, cool, but how did they do that? What is the Photoshop wizardry that happened? Well, you're in luck because today I'm going to show you that Photoshop wizardry and I'm going to take an image from beginning to end all the way through. Now, if you want to see how I made these images, just click the link right here and you'll be able to see behind the scenes how we lit and shot them. But this is going to be taking you through from the raw image all the way to the final. And be sure to stick around because I have some super tasty Photoshop secrets that I'm going to sprinkle throughout this. So the first thing I'm going to do is pull these images into Photoshop Creative Cloud 2019. I pulled two versions of the same image because I want to show you what the raw images look like. So this image is exactly what the camera saw, the straight out of camera version of this image. But then through this step of using the raw dialog box, I got to here. Same thing with this secondary image, the more beauty one that I'm going to show you. This is straight out of the camera. And then this is just using raw magic, what we did. Now I have a separate video all on how to do this preliminary color grading in raw and how I actually made a preset, which is exactly what I did for these. So guess what? I'm gonna skip it. You'll have to watch because we're moving right past that and moving on into Photoshop. So the first little magic Photoshop trick that you might not know that you definitely should is when you come into actions. Actions, if you look at the way they're displayed right here, are the way a lot of people know because they don't know about the secret magic trick of the button mode. And I'm going to show you that here. So you go up to the dialog box, you click button mode, and ooh, all of a sudden they're really beautiful. I have them color coded because let's keep it organized. This is where I pre-program what I'm going to do. Now, I'm going to show you the first thing that I do on just about every image. It's actually an action, and if you go down to the description link below, you can actually upload this into your own Photoshop, but I'm going to walk you through it. So the first thing I do is I do color grade love wins, and I click that, and it does a little ooh, making the image have a little bit more of that black and white tonal quality. So let's break down what happens. The first thing that it did was this layer here, and if I take it off of soft light and put it on normal and change the fill all the way, you'll see that it actually converted it to black and white. And the way that it did that is by going through the channels. Now I could do a separate video on this whole process, so I'm going to skip it because you can use the link below to download this action. But it takes the green layer and it pastes it into its own layer. Then we drop the fill to 13%. We change the blend mode into soft light, which, blend modes, love them. And then I add a channel mixer layer, which if we pop that open is again, it's just a conversion into black and white. It's another one that's pulling out, if I take it all the way to 100, it's just pulling out different tonal qualities. So basically what I did is do two black and white layers that are pulling out different tonal information and drop the fill layer so they're only showing through a little bit. And then the last is a hue and saturation level. If I don't have that on, there's just a little bit more desaturation, so it just pops that in. Now the next thing I do is I do a merge stamp visible, which I don't know if you know what that means. It took me a while to know what that means, but it is awesome once you know. Basically what it does is it takes all the layers below and it snaps them into one layer. So I do Shift, Option, Command, E, and it's taking all that information into one. Then what I do is come into blend modes and change it into soft light. Now watch this. Bam! Now that is the big pop. That's the big wow moment, is once you convert it into soft light. Because look at the difference just that made. Ooh, I'm gonna make that bigger so you can see. Look at the difference that made. Ooh, boring, bland, blah, blah, to ooh, super dramatic and sexy and amazing. So that is something that I do just as a base layer for images like these. Now, I can always drop the fill if I feel like it's too much or dial it back now. But that gives me the preliminary color grade that I'm gonna use and then go into cleaning and all these processes in Photoshop that we love. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that on the secondary image. That's more about the body. So I'm going to press my love wins, which is going to go through all those motions. And then I'm going to do stamp visible, which is Shift, Option, Command, E. And then I'm going to change the blend mode to soft light. So again, looking at this one, big difference, big poppy difference. And that, when you see in a lot of my images, when you see in a lot of fashion images, that contrast, it's a type of mid-tone contrast that really gives it that punch that is just, we love it. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do is put all of that into a folder. So I'm going to do Select All, Shift A, and then Command G. And I'm going to title that Color Grade. That's my shorthand for that. So then I know everything in there is just to get me to that first preliminary step. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to stamp visible again. So I have a fresh, clean layer that has all that copied information. And now I'm going to label that base. Then the next thing I'm going to do is to start clean. Now this is where I use the healing and cloning stamp. So I'm going to do a new layer because we want to work non-destructively. And I'm going to title that Clean. Now from here, what I'm just going to do, and I'm going to zoom in a bit more since this image is zoomed out a little bit, and I'm going to go to J is the healing brush, and I am going to come around. I'm actually going to use my Wacom tablet because it's amazing. And I'm going to come around and just look for anything that really pops out at me. So like most normal human beings, she has a little bit of skin texture, and we're just going to knock that out pretty quickly. And you'll see the size of my brush that I'm using is just a little bit bigger than the spot that I'm wanting to attack. And I do like a little squiggle circular motion on top. Now, if I want to change the size of my brush, I'm just going to use the bracket keys, make it bigger by using the right bracket, smaller using the left. And I'm going to come in and just hit these spots. Now, this is kind of boring, so we're going to speed it up.
You're a rebel, getting into trouble. You are kind of like a fire, like a fire, like a fire. Unpredictable, so original. You are never backing down, backing down, backing down.
And if there's anything long like this wisp of hair, I'm actually going to change the healing brush to the spot healing and make my brush size just a tiny bit bigger than the hair itself. And the spot healing brush is really good at using the information on either side of the thing that you want to remove to find out what it should be, and cover it up pretty well. So any sort of stray hairs, I'm just going to use the spot healing brush, knock those out. The important thing to remember with retouching is not to get really absorbed in it. Well, to be self-absorbed. Because most people, when they're looking at the image, are not going to really be in it looking crazily at every little bit of detail. So if you are spending, which I used to do all the time, I really did. I used to just obsess and be in it all the time. And there's this thing called the law of diminishing returns, which basically means that you're wasting your time. So don't do it. So then I come in and I'm going to knock these hairs out. And I'm still using the spot healing brush.
I go all in to lose or win. Build things up to knock 'em down. It's the way we keep our high, moving like a hurricane. There will come a time for when we can wash away.
Really should have de-haired her leotard, but coulda, woulda, shoulda. Oh my gosh, I just tried to get a hair. I just tried to get rid of a hair that was actually on my screen. Whoops! All right. Perfect. The next thing I'm going to do, now that all the big spots are out of the way, is I'm going to address the skin tone and texture that I see here. Now, there's just a little bit, like every person, well, like every person I know, has a little bit of irregularity in the skin texture and tone, and I have a really fast retouching secret way of dealing with it. It's called split frequency. Now, you might be saying to yourself, I know about split frequency, Gia. You're not teaching me anything new. But guess what? I probably am, because this is split frequency 2.0. It's usually for retouchers who really know what they're doing. It's kind of a new thing that's popping out now, and it's amazing, mind-blowing, so I'm going to show you that. So again, the process of creating these layers is way more complicated than I can go and do. Although if you want, leave a comment below if you're interested in me breaking down this process, and I'm happy to make a video about it, but you gotta interact with me. You gotta let me know. Okay, I'm just gonna press this button, FS 2.0, which again, if you check down in the links, you can download it and you can just press this yourself. Now the important thing to think about this is this dialog box median comes up, and this is where you determine how much blur you're gonna have. Now, you wanna knock it back just to the place, and I usually zoom in a little bit, where you stop to see texture. Because what it's doing is it's separating the color from the texture layer. The goal of it is to separate it, but if you do it too much, it will sort of conflate things, and then you'll start to get color and texture on the same layer, and it negates the point. Now I have this lovely pattern of layers going on. What does it mean? I have two protective layers, low 1 and high 1, that are just safety mechanisms. I'm really gonna operate on high 2 and low 1. So high 2 is texture. The way we're gonna deal with it is we're now gonna use the clone stamp tool, which you can access easily by pressing S. And the big key thing is to make sure that it is on current layer only. I'm gonna show you what it does if you're not. It'll be really easy for you to figure out. I was like, what's going on? It'll look crazy like that. And that's how you'll know, oops, I forgot to do it on current layer only. If you do it on current layer only, what it's going to do is allow you to move around and copy texture from other places. So since I'm about texture, I'm gonna make the brush a little bit harder. And like, let's say this line right here, I'm going to copy texture from right above and paste it just right down below. So I'm not knocking out the texture, and that's the big indicator of somebody who's really green, doesn't have a lot of Photoshop experience, is they'll just murder texture. And we know as human beings that most people have texture in a lot of places. You know, I would venture to guess all places. The whole point of retouching is to make something look beautiful and flawless and effortless. Hashtag woke up like this. So you want to make it so that people can't retrace your steps. They don't know. It's stealthy, it's ninja-like. I'm just copying texture from nearby places. So you can see this little bit of texture on her leg, just copying. Now I'm moving pretty fast because I'm a Photoshop ninja. It will take you a little bit longer to get to this speed, but be gracious with yourself. And let's see. So this up until now, with this split frequency, has just been working on this texture layer. I'm gonna speed it up so we get it done, and then I'm gonna show you what we do with the color layer, and this is where the magic happens.
I'm going crazy for you, baby. Don't know how you're making me feel this way. What can I say? That's what I like about you.
All right, one important thing to note is when you come to the borderlands, if you try to do something like this, okay, boom. Now what you're going to do, now that you have a lot of the texture, and let's just check other places. I sometimes forget, but it's nice to make sure that you've addressed any place where there's skin, there's opportunity to have a little bit of finessing. I'm gonna zoom in here, smooth this out just a little bit. And that looked like too much to me, so I'm using Command Z to go back. There we go. And since I hit it a little too hard, I'm gonna drop the opacity. So now I can just smooth out a little bit without killing all of the texture here. Because there are some places where it's optimal to have texture, and there are other places where, you know, people use skin serums to try to make it look like they don't have any texture. So let's just be gracious. Let's just get it done. Okay. The other thing that I do at this step while we're still addressing texture is where I find places where there are texture where it's less desirable. I have another strategy where I use a brush. So I'm going to press B and then come over to the color selector, and I'm going to make sure there's zero hue. and there's 0 saturation, and the brightness is at 50. Basically, this layer here is a 50% gray layer, and then I'm going to paint with 50, but my brush is not going to have any texture. What that means, oh, my brush is too big. Oh no. Sweet baby Jesus. Like, oh my gosh, I realized I haven't saved anything. Oh my God, I hadn't saved it. Whew. Okay, we're fine. I have been burned enough in my career to know that the first thing you do is you save it, but
I go all in to lose or win.
okay. So then what I'm essentially doing is painting no texture. Now, of course, if I do it at 100% and I paint no texture, we get the porcelain doll look, which is suboptimal. Therefore, what I'm going to do is drop the opacity really low. I want it like 20, and I'm gonna make my brush fluffy, and I'm just going to hit a couple places where she has texture that's not really desirable. Now, you'll find this with people, especially as they start to get a little more texture around here, around the nose. This is a good option to do because we don't want to see those pores even though they're there. This is a nice practice to get into where you can just dab, 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 little places where we don't want all that extra texture. And then boom, voila. All right, now that we've done all that, we're going to move to the color layer, and this is where all the magic happens. So we're gonna go to low 2, and now I'm gonna use a form of the brush that I really, prior to learning this method, had not ever used before, hadn't really heard of before, and it is the mixer brush. Now, the mixer brush basically does exactly what it sounds like. It's gonna mix things together, but when it comes to this process, it's amazing. I'm going to change the wetness to 50, and flow I'm going to keep low, about 40. So this is where, because we've separated our layers, we can now move color information around the image, but blending it in a really beautiful way. So I have my mixer brush going. I have soft because I want to blend it. And look, this line right here, I'm just taking the color information from right above or below, and it just like, whoa, right? You're shook. I'm shook. We're shook together. You just keep going, and you can really smooth and recontour. Basically, this process combines cleaning with dodging and burning, and it just, once I learned it, I mean, whew, I can't even think about the amount of hours I've been able to spend watching Netflix instead of retouching images. Thank you very much. Loved Bird Box. So now I'm just painting, moving color information around. It's going to preserve all the texture because it's on its own separate layer, which is amazing. The one thing you want to be sure of is that you aren't going like this because it's going to blend into a different area. So if you do that, just go back. You want to stick to similarly colored areas. Now see, I could even move this down to nix the color differentiation there with the black and see how it still keeps the ribbing in. It's like amazing. Now I'm going to do that just a tiny bit with her face. I'm going to make my brush a little bit smaller just to smooth around just a little bit, make sure the light is hitting where I want it to hit, blending just a little bit more. Now what I can do is even with her nose, like just smooth that out a little bit. So if you see before and after. And just, this is really great for transitions. And if there's a hot spot, you can just blend over like this and make it so it's a little less hot. So, boom. Now, that is the cleaning done. If there were marks in the background, I would address those, but this is pretty amazing. The last thing that I'll do is a polishing step where we adjust body contours and everything like that. Now, remember to save. Okay. We're going to dig into Liquify. Now, Liquify is a powerful tool. It comes with great responsibility. I'm going to show you how to leverage it well. Now, the first thing we're going to do is do another stamp visible. So Shift, Option, Command, E. And that will give us a fresh layer, merging everything from beneath. Now, I'm going to liquefy it. Well, I am, but I'm also going to name it Liquify so I know. The secret tidbit with this that you want to know and always practice. And what I just recently started doing this, and I'm just like, oh, obviously I should have been doing this forever ago, is to make that a smart object. So you're going to click on the layer, right click or control click if you're on a Mac, and say convert to smart object. What that means is anything you put on it, if you do a liquefy, if you do a lens distortion, if you do any filter like that, it is going to save your tracks so that you can go back later and say, ugh, I didn't like that. Or you can say, oh my gosh, I messed up on something, and go back and then reapply that after you've done a new stamp visible. Okay, if it's over your head, don't worry, you'll get there, rewatch it, rewind it, you got it, I believe in you. Okay, now the shortcut way to get there is Shift Option X, or if you go through the filter, you drop down filter and then liquefy. And then this dialog box comes up. The big thing about liquefy is that it allows you to move and maneuver shape. So I'm really only going to be using the pucker tool, the bloat tool, and more than anything, the forward warp tool. Now, I'm also going to show you about freeze mask and thaw mask because those are really cool. I'm going to do a whole, I just need to do it. If you want me to do a whole thing digging into liquefy, let me know in a comment below because I will do that for you, my friend, because I like you. All right, starting with the forward warp tool. We're going to start with the shape here. I'm going to change the size of my brush using the bracket keys and just move, gently nudge the shape so that it's a little more optimal. The key to using liquefy is really going back and forth, going gently, and changing your brush size, because you'll notice as I did that bigger motion, little teeny ripples happen. So then I come down now a bit smaller and adjust those little teeny ripples. And it can feel a little bit tedious, but honestly, this is the part that makes me feel like God, so I'm into it. The things that come out of my mouth. All right. The other thing is body contouring. Now, body contouring comes with a lot of ethical considerations. You don't want to make somebody who is a size 16 look like a size 2. That's just ethically not the best thing to do. However, you can leverage shape in order to give somebody more of an ideal shape, which is generally what we do in commercial photography. I try to advocate against that sometimes and try to like weasel my way in there, but I'm going to show you what I would do for a commercial client. Because Crosby is an amazing curve model, we're going to optimize the shape and make it more ideal. But instead of making her smaller, we're going to make her a little bit fuller in that idealizing of that shape, because this is the type of work that she does and this is who she's representing. Therefore, I'm going to make my brush a little bit bigger, and I am just going to move this shape out just a tiny bit, because society tells us that hips should be perfectly like, and I don't know anybody that's true for, but I'm going to do this. And again, I'm changing the size of my brush respectively. And then I'm going to come down here and change this so it's just, and again, as you'll see, I'm not going crazy. I'm not going ham. I'm not making her into a different person with a totally different shape. I'm keeping things really close to reality because I want it to be ethical, but I also want it to be believable. Oh my God. That was so scary. Oh, that was terrifying. So just changing these shapes a little bit here. Now, the other thing that I noticed is the way the hair is designed, it's a little bit wide here. So I'm going to come in and change that shape. What I'm going to do is preserve her face though. So that's where I'm going to come to freeze mask, and I'm going to save everything that I want to really protect. And then what that's going to do is it's going to protect that area that's not masked off and allow me to manipulate that without messing with her features. I'm also just going to change the width of her top knot. And this is the part where you really get to play around, but you want to make sure that you're, sticking to reality. Then when it's time to thaw the mask, I come over here and I can just erase it away. Boom, boom, boom. Yes, that is Crosby looking amazing and I love it. So I'm going to press OK. Because we did a smart object, it's right here, so I could turn it on. Let's do this. I can turn it on, I can turn it off to see what we did. Okay. The other thing I'm going to do on this smart object is I'm going to do a lens correction. If you watch my other video, you'll hear me talk about lens angle and always wanting to stick to someone's center of gravity. That said, there's even always lens distortion. So that's one thing I definitely do because most people don't like their lower half looking disproportionate to their topper half. And we're going to adjust that by going to Filter, Lens Correction. And then I'm going to do Custom. I'm going to de-bloat one. And then I'm going to come down here to Transform, and Vertical Perspective is where I'm going to slide it. So now you can see if we do Preview on and off, you can see that that just changed that perspective so everything is in proportion. Click OK. Boom. Looking fierce and amazing. Love it. The one thing that I did notice is sometimes happens with lens distortion is heads can be a little elongated, so I'm going to pop back into Liquify. Then I'm just going to pop her head down just a touch. Boom. Beautiful. And then from there, my final polishing step is doing a sharpen layer. And what that sharpen layer is doing a merge visible, that stamp like I showed you before, and then it is creating a gray layer of 50%, and then it's coming over here to other high pass, and it is, and you'll see this here, if we click on Crosby's eye, it will show you, and it's just taking the color information out and just looking at texture, and just like, bam. Then what happens is when you pair that with the soft light mode, it just creates contrast that makes things look a bit more sharpened. Boom. Yes, and that's it. I press save, and then I will do an export save for web to do a web optimized version, and that's it. If we look at these three images together, we have straight out of camera, preliminary color grade in raw, and final image. So boom, 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 boom. That was a lot of work. I'm not actually going to do the other one. If you would like me to do it, leave a comment below and I'll do a separate video on retouching more for beauty, but I'm tired. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, and be sure, if you haven't already, to subscribe, because every week I come out with new content that is designed to help you be the most badass photographer you can be. Bye.